Welcome to Divorce and Relationships Decoded, the show that takes the guesswork out of love, loss, and everything in between. Hosted by me, Jennifer Perri, a CDC certified divorce and empowerment coach, and Dr. Deborah Wilder, a divorce and relationship expert. This is the place where real conversations meet expert advice. So get ready to decode divorce and relationships like never before. Divorce and Relationships Decoded starts now. Hi, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. I am one of your hosts, Jennifer Perri. I'm a CDC certified divorce coach and a financial therapist, and I am joined today by my co-host, Dr. Deborah Wilder, who is a divorce and relationship specialist. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jennifer. How are you doing today?
Good. We are back for another episode, and today we're going to talk about relationships. I know we talk a lot about divorce because we both work in that field quite a bit, but we want to talk about relationships today. But before we even get started, I want to just thank all of you who have been sending in such incredible feedback of our new show. We're very excited, and what had started just really as us wanting to provide education and letting people know, hey, this is who we are, we're here to help you, has really turned into a mission for us. We had a lot of feedback last week about parental alienation. And I know you had mentioned that there was one thing that you had wanted to share, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to do that before we get into today's topic.
Okay, great. Yes, we spoke last week about parental alienation, and we also touched on the older kids who are really adults now. And one key question for any child to think about if you're estranged from a parent is, are you estranged because of things that actually happened to you with that parent, that the parent did, like a real troubled relationship with that parent? Or do you think that it's more about what you were told about the other parent? Because there are a lot of parents who are very close with their children, let's say before a divorce or before problems in a marriage, and then the estrangement happens based on what the child is told, not on the child's actual interactions with that parent. So that's a key question to ask.
Great question.
Yeah, because it could, and I work with plenty of kids who really had a decent relationship, at worst, a decent relationship with that parent, and then the alienation or the estrangement began. And I've also worked with plenty of kids who actually had a very troubled relationship. That really, there were things that led to the estrangement, really valid things. So a key question, especially for older kids, like we were talking about last time, if these adult children can think, wow, what was my relationship like with my parent before all of this? And if it was good and things did not happen with that parent that really weren't so good, then maybe I was brainwashed a little bit. Maybe I feel this way because I was told to feel this way, not because of actual things that happened. So I just wanted to bring that up because that's a very important question for people to ask.
And I think that is a very powerful question too, because I can't speak for every situation, but I know in what personally has happened for us, there was a phenomenal relationship before. And I think what it was that there wasn't a lot of aired troubles, right? You keep it away from your children, as most people should do when you're having an issue. So I think maybe in their case, it was because they didn't see it, but there was a lot happening behind closed doors that when it happened, they just fed off of the reaction of the other parent, which is unfortunate. There's two sides to every story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you only hear the one that makes the biggest noise. I've had something happen in my life that was former best friend is now married to ex-husband. Very weird. When him and I separated and divorced, there was all this me that I did all these horrific things. And I didn't say much. I chose to take the high road. It wasn't easy, but I knew eventually it would come around. And now they're married. And a lot of people are like, that's interesting. When you choose to take the high road in that situation, it all plays itself out. And I wasn't going to give any more energy to it than what was necessarily already being given to it by everybody else. But then when the dust settles, you're like, this is interesting. And to your point about especially older children, they had a phenomenal relationship with either parent, and then the divorce, the thing happened, and then they reacted off of the parent that was remaining with them. That can so muddy the waters for so many people. But I think that is a very powerful question. So thank you for adding that in.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody who's watching this, if you are or have been estranged from one or both of your parents, just consider, is it basically because of the relationship that you had with that particular parent, or is it based on what you were told about that parent? And if it's the latter, then maybe you could think about pursuing some healing if you have that opportunity. Sometimes it's too late.
That's a great question. Thank you for adding that in. So today we're going to shift gears a little bit because we want to make sure that we spend just as much time talking about relationships, because not everybody who's listening to us is separated or going through a divorce. So today we want to talk about, how do you know that you're in the right relationship?
I think there can be a lot of elements to this. One is, does this person, when you're with this person, make your life happier and easier? To me, that's, if you answer no to either part, happier or easier, then it's time to take a look at your relationship. That doesn't mean you have to leave it or break up or anything. But if a person makes your life happier and easier, that's a really great start. And if you can have certainly mutual respect, and if there's trust and you help each other, nurture each other and help each other grow, and there's healthy communication, you respect each other, you treat each other as if you matter, which is very important, and you enjoy being with that person. Hopefully you share common kind of core values. Again, everything doesn't have to be the same, but enough when you have those two circles, those concentric circles, if the bigger part is, the center part is bigger than the other two, then, you share a lot. But bottom line, I think, is if this person helps you make your life happier and easier, that's a really great place, place to start.
I think about my husband, and it took me a long time to find him, or for God to bring us together, more or less a better way to say that. He is the first person that I want to tell anything to, no matter what it is, good, bad, indifferent. And I think if anybody had our cell phones, they would be like, could these people stop telling each other how wonderful they think each other is? But I think it's because we've had so much experience where that wasn't the center of the relationship, the communication wasn't the center of the relationship, that we now don't want to ever take that for granted, period. He lights up my world and he makes everything in my life easier. If the person isn't making you feel happy or making life easier, how do you bring that to their attention?
I think you can, let me just back up a little bit. I know I do this a lot. Your
good.
Relationship with Carm is so amazing. And I was smiling just because I see a lot of the communication between the two of you, and you all have something extraordinary. And it's a blessing. You're a blessing to each other. And I love, it's a very sweet and lovey-dovey and very sweet and wonderful, deep, deep relationship.
It is, for sure.
Yeah. And as far as your question is concerned, if the relationship is important and if there's a lot worth fighting for, then you can fight for it. If only one person in a relationship is fighting for the relationship, that's telling as well. But if you really care about this person and you want this relationship to work, then you can let this other person know, you're very important to me. And I know we're struggling with some of these things. And I want us to be stronger. I want us to be better. I want us to be able to have a healthier relationship. Let's go talk to somebody. Not everybody's going to agree to do that. And that doesn't mean that the relationship can't get better. Maybe it just takes one person to really try to do some work and bring it back to the relationship. But there's help. If the relationship is important enough to both parties, then it's worth getting help. And the relationship certainly can be helped most of the time. Oftentimes when folks come to me, let's just say couples, much of the time, it's really not about reconciliation as much as rebuilding and reconstruction. So depending on, again, if you have kids, it's a lot more worth saving, or at least a lot more worth working toward. So if people want to be in a relationship, they can work on it and they can get some help for it. Just because things aren't working out so well doesn't mean you have to break up. Just get some help and see what's possible.
A lot of clients that I'm working with too that are contemplating divorce, or if they're going to separate, like they look at it and say, I can't be the only one. I can't be the only one that's realizing that there's stuff that's wrong here. But whenever I ask him, he's, I'm fine. We don't need to go to counseling. What do you see as the reason why one person is like, something's wrong here, and the other one is looking at it like, I honestly don't see anything wrong?
I think when expectations aren't met, that leads to difficulty. And to be able to identify, even let's say in premarital counseling, to be able to identify what the expectations are for what a marriage involves, what's important in a relationship, how do you nurture that relationship? People do grow apart too, life happens.
Sure.
And so not everybody is as equipped to handle and manage and deal with emotions, difficult situations. And as you said before, and usually in the beginning of a relationship, frankly, in the beginning of a relationship, people usually send their representative, like the best part of themselves. And over time, right, over time, the real, not that's not a part of who you are really, but you're sending your best self. Most people do. And then over time, you just adapt to each other and you learn what it's like to live together or to be together. And how does that feel? And then when you have stress, if there's a problem at work, a problem with other family members or health or things like that, when challenges come into a relationship, those can really test a relationship. If it's easy, it's easy. But when the challenges come in, that's when you can really learn about somebody. So there are all sorts of reasons why people, their feelings change or why relationships change. But the core thing, if you value that other person and you really want that other person to be in your life, then you need to work at it. Like love, I was thinking, I talk about this at different times when I work with couples. Love is not just a feeling, it's a verb as well. It's a noun, like to show love, to feel love, but to love, to be loving. What does that mean? We can, again, feel love. The other part is how do you love? How do you actually love somebody? And so part of this is being able to love that person in a way that will help, again, manage or sustain or take care of the relationship. Again, like the garden analogy, which I'm sure we've all thought of and heard of. But there are so many elements. Again, the beginning of a relationship is exciting. There's loving feelings, romantic feelings, and things like that. And then again, life continues to happen. And then you have some conflict or some pressure or some stress, or you may grow apart or lose those feelings. But I always tell folks if two people are really interested in working on the relationship, then most of the time it can be made a lot better.
And it does take two. I know we're going to do a segment at some point in time about the love languages, because I think that's probably one of the coolest things that I ever read, other than understanding my money personality and helping other clients know that. I think it's understanding your love language too, and your partner's love language, because you could be very different. I'm married to an engineer. I'm just this free-spirited, always thinking 10 steps ahead. And we learn to complement each other very well in that space. And I think it's that complementary relationship that makes it as powerful as it is. Do you encourage the couples that you work with to have date nights and kitchen table conversations? And do you encourage that? And if you do, what type of structure are you encouraging for them?
That's a great question. Yes, I think date nights are wonderful. I also think setting aside time to talk about these things is very important. Some people are very reactive and they can't talk about things right away. They're not in that space, so they may need, so we structure, how do you, when someone is upset about something and they don't feel, and the other person wants to talk about it right then and there, and they're like, I'm not talking about anything right now. I just need to get out of here and go to the gym for 30 minutes or an hour, and then I'll come back. And we're going to talk about at some point attachment styles down the road and that sort of thing. So it's very important to structure, what does managing conflict look like? Because the person who wants to talk about things right then and there, that person's anxiety goes up when it's not dealt with right then and there. And the other person who doesn't want to, just isn't in that space, when they're feeling pressure, their anxiety goes up. So you have these very opposite sort of ways of dealing with tension and stress. We talk about a structure and a strategy. If one person wants to really talk about something right then and there, and the other person is just really just not mentally available for that, that the other person could say, yes, I will talk about this with you, but I need 30 minutes. Give me 30 minutes just to get my head together or whatever, and I'll come back. And if I'm not ready at that time, I'll set the timer for 15 more minutes. There needs to be a structure, because it's not really fair just to leave the other person hanging, the other person who really is wanting to talk about stuff. It's not really fair. So we work on establishing a structure of communication. But I do agree that it's very important to address the issues that need to be addressed. And I also, when I'm doing a mediation or any kind of conflict resolution sort of thing, to make sure that as much as you can, dealing with the conflict is done in the spirit of resolution, not winning or losing. It's hopefully a win-win where you can have conversations. But a lot of people, they weren't modeled, let's say, a healthy relationship. They don't know how to be in a healthy relationship, and they're doing the best that they can. So they can learn. People can learn. My parents, my father's, he's been gone for about 7 years, but they had, I think I mentioned before, just a soul level, a meant to be relationship. And growing up with that, my father was a psychologist as well, which is why I wanted to be a psychologist. So talked about, there was nothing left unsaid and nothing not talked about. So we all grew up. I've got a brother and 2 sisters who I will say are all in wonderful, happy and healthy marriages. Mine ended up not being. I'm the only one divorced, but they are all in wonderful, healthy and happy relationships. But my parents did not come from families that were healthy in as far as relationships are concerned. They both had tragedy and hardship in their childhood. So it was their mission to create the family that they didn't have really, and to learn how to deal with things. So we grew up, my siblings and I, my mom and dad would talk about. There was nothing that we did not talk about when it needed to be talked about. So, it was like, oh God, we're thinking as kids, oh, shoot, we have to. But it's important. So we learn how to talk about things, or we learn how to deal with things, hopefully in a healthy way. But that is a learned skill. Like that is something someone can learn to do, even if you didn't come from that. Dealing with conflict in a relationship, or dealing with wanting just to, even if there's not a lot of conflict, you just want to make things different or better, there is help. These are learned skills. And those folks who struggle with some kind of emotional issues when it comes to dealing with conflict, there are a lot of people who are conflict avoidant and they just don't deal with things. So then there's a buildup and people get triggered and you wonder why. All I said was this, like, why did you freak out on me? Come on, I just said that. But that is just the last straw that can trigger somebody to the point of explosion or real frustration. So the good news is these are skills that can be learned. And I would say relatively easily learned. It doesn't take that long with a structure, with a proper structure, and even some handouts or some work paper, like worksheets, or just, again, a structure that each person learns can really be implemented well in a relationship. It can do a ton of damage control.
Back to the point about you don't really want to win an argument. What do you really win? You just, right. I started recently following Jefferson Fisher, and if you haven't followed him, you need to check it. He is amazing. And he talks about communicating and the art of communicating. It's not just because they're there and they're our partner that we're allowed to trash them when we don't feel good, or we're allowed to lash out at them when something is going on in our life. If you have a tendency to be very high energy and very quick response, sometimes you say things you don't realize how somebody else receives it, which is why I really hate having conversations, like serious conversations, through email and text. You can't feel the emotion in it. You don't know how somebody has emphasized a word or not. But I think just because you are in a relationship with somebody and they are supposed to love you through better or worse sickness and health, doesn't give you the right to lash out at them without having the follow-up of, I'm really sorry.
Give or take 50% of marriages in the United States in divorce. And of the 50% that are left, there are quite a few who aren't happy with each other, but they choose to stay together for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes for the kids, sometimes because they don't believe in divorce, sometimes because they feel stuck and they don't know how to get out of that, or they're worried about, is the grass really greener on the other side, or life is just comfortable. So people stay together for all sorts of reasons. It's interesting too, I work with a lot of couples, and over time, the sex life changes, the sexual interests change as well. So that's a big part of, it's a priority, sometimes not to both parties, but to just one and the other person. So they have to learn how to nurture that relationship too before it's too late, before you are totally friend zoned and it's just too late to get those feelings back. And then you might start looking elsewhere, or that if it's such an imbalance in the relationship where one party may really want to have a sexual relationship with the spouse, but for whatever reason or reasons, the spouse is just not interested, not into it, just not feeling it at all. It could be because of physical issues. It could be because that person is not attracted to the other person anymore. It could be that other person doesn't know how to create an intimate sort of setting the stage. A lot of times, not just women, plenty of men as well, but I would say the majority, at least in my work, of the issues of not being as interested in having a sexual relationship, more so tend to be the women who've had kids for a while and they've been married for a while, and it's hard to switch gears. I think for men, most of the time, and I'm generalizing here, so I'm not trying to stereotype, but I have to generalize based on, at least I'll just share my own personal experiences with work. It's easier for a man, I think, to turn that switch on than it is for a woman much of the time at some point. And that's a challenge because let's say the guy, there are, again, plenty of women, I'm just throwing out their generalization. The husband will be very frustrated that the wife isn't interested. Why is she not sexual? And she might be thinking, what are you doing to help me get in the mood? Like, how are you treating me? How are you making? So it's a much more emotional thing for a woman to want to engage sexually with a man. And it's still emotional for the husband, let's just say, or the guy, but it's not as emotional. It's not based on that as much. So that's a big deal too. That's a big deal because that can certainly lead to a break in the relationship. It's understanding when we talk about the beginning of a relationship with all of that, and then as time goes by, understanding what it is that we all need to nurture that part of ourselves, and whether it's just feeling like we matter, feeling loved, feeling cared for, or feeling we want to have a sexual relationship or sexual intimacy, what needs to take place then so that each person feels special. That's a big part of it, feeling like you matter. I know that I matter to my partner, that having me in his life is extremely important, not for what I do, but for who I am. And likewise, so when you feel like you matter, and I actually talk about 3 criteria: feeling that you belong in each other's lives, feeling like you really know each other, what your likes are, your desires, your fears, things that are important to you, and then feeling like you matter, that having you in my life matters. Those are 3, I would say, foundational elements of a relationship. And based on how you feel in those 3 areas, that certainly can help to identify the health of that relationship. But as we talked about in the beginning, you make someone's life, or having that person in your life makes your life happier and easier. That's the feeling of you matter. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I agree with what you're saying. If you have a relationship that's only built on intimacy, that's a problem. So we could talk about this topic for 2 days straight. There's so many things about understanding if you're in the relationship that you're meant to be in, or if it's the right one. There are also red flags. And I know at some point we're going to talk about all those things. I'm going to throw this back over to you, Dr. Wilder, just to leave us with some closing thoughts about relationships.
So we started talking about, how do you know if you're in the right relationship? If you want to stay in that relationship, if you feel that really you've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, and you want it to work, you really care for and love this other person, and again, you don't have elements of abuse and things like that, but things aren't quite the way you want, there is hope. A lot of these things are learned skills. So if each of you is invested, each of you wants to have this relationship get better and healthier, then there is hope, and there are people who can help you with that. These, again, are skills that can be learned. Just because things aren't working out necessarily as well as you want them, please don't think it's over right off the bat. There's work that can be done, so there is hope.
A lot of the people who are watching this are going to find elements of themselves or their relationships in what we're sharing. So thank you again for coming back and for joining us today. And thank you, my dear friend, for shedding a light on how to find out if you're in the right relationship. And we will be back again next week with a new episode. We'll be back in the middle of the week with the question of the week. And as always, thank you so much for following us here at Divorce and Relationships Decoded. And make sure you're sharing us. Like us, share us, make sure you subscribe. And we'll be back again next time. Bye, my friend.
Bye. Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye, everybody. That's a wrap for this episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. If this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, healing, growth, and transformation happens one conversation at a time. If you have a question, a story, or a topic you'd love for us to explore, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note at questions@drdecoded.com. Your thoughts and experiences are always welcome here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another insightful episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. Until then, take care and keep moving forward.